You know, in warfare, there's one thing more dangerous than a weapon you can see. It's the weapon that strikes before you even know it's coming. That's what BRAHMOS represents. Not just speed, not just power, but a kind of precision so exact, so lethal, that it rewrites the rules of engagement. And when India unleashed the BRAHMOS into the global spotlight, it didn't just surprise the world, it stunned it. This missile wasn't built to impress, it was built to end conversations, and that's exactly what it did. Now picture this, a missile that travels at 3 times the speed of sound. You can't hear it coming. You can't see it on time, and when it lands, it doesn't just break targets, it shatters illusions. BRAHMOS redefined how a modern military flexes without firing a single shot. When that technology was revealed, countries around the world had to go back to the drawing board. Suddenly, deterrence wasn't about who had the most weapons. It was about who had the right one, and India had the right one. We're talking about a system with pinpoint accuracy. Not just destroying the target, but doing it so fast, so precisely, that by the time radar even begins to pick it up, it's too late. BRAHMOS doesn't knock, it enters, and it finishes. That kind of capability shifts the balance, especially in a region where the stakes have always been high. With every test, every successful launch, India didn't just demonstrate hardware, it demonstrated resolve, and that resolve, that scared people, especially across the border. See, Pakistan has always postured. Threats, words, warnings, but BRAHMOS turned that noise into silence. It became clear that the era of ambiguous escalation was over. This wasn't about conventional retaliation anymore. It was about strategic dominance. BRAHMOS gave India the high ground, literally and figuratively. It gave Indian forces something few nations possess, a strike weapon that no adversary in the region could defend against in real time. That's power. Real power, and look, this didn't happen overnight. BRAHMOS was years in the making. Indo-Russian cooperation laid the foundation, yes, but India did the lifting. Indian scientists, Indian soldiers, Indian engineers. They turned blueprints into fear. This was homegrown excellence paired with global ambition. And now, it's being exported. Countries lining up, taking notice. Because BRAHMOS isn't just a missile anymore, it's a brand. A symbol of India's arrival in the elite league of military innovation. The message it sent to Pakistan wasn't coded. It was loud, direct, and undeniable. Provocation will not be met with patience. It will be met with precision, and not weeks later, not days later, but minutes. Seconds. BRAHMOS gave India that capability, that control, and more importantly, that respect. This is more than just military talk. It's national psychology. When a nation knows it has the ultimate response, it walks differently. It speaks differently, and its enemies, they listen more carefully. Pakistan had to reassess every calculation, every bluff, because with BRAHMOS in the arsenal, India didn't need to shout. It just needed to point. In the modern age, the most dangerous enemy is the one who can end the fight before it begins. And that's what BRAHMOS did. It didn't start a war, it ended the idea of one. When India first rolled out the BRAHMOS missile, the world didn't just take notice, it paused. Governments, intelligence agencies, defense think tanks, they all froze for a moment, because what India revealed wasn't just another test launch. It was a seismic statement that the global military balance had a new player, and this player wasn't asking permission to join the table. It was flipping it. The BRAHMOS missile didn't just challenge old assumptions, it shattered them. A supersonic cruise missile, co-developed with Russia, capable of traveling at Mach 3, with pinpoint accuracy and virtually zero reaction time. That wasn't just advancement, that was shock, and the reaction spoke volumes. The United States took immediate interest. China, always watching, tightened its scrutiny. Even Russia, a partner in development, recognized the BRAHMOS as a technology that went beyond expectations. Why? Because BRAHMOS wasn't a slow burn. It was a breakthrough. Most cruise missiles in the world fly low and slow, sneaking past radar with stealth. But BRAHMOS flipped the script. It roared through the sky with supersonic speed, making defense systems nearly obsolete in its path. Nations that thought they had the upper hand now had a question. Can we defend against this? Now let me be clear. India didn't roll out BRAHMOS to posture or provoke. It rolled it out to protect. But that protection had consequences, especially for Pakistan, because up until that point, there was a balance, an uneasy one, but a balance nonetheless. Pakistan banked on tactical nukes, short-range weapons, and threats of rapid escalation. But BRAHMOS cut through that fog like a blade. Suddenly, India had a weapon that could deliver a precision strike deep into Pakistani territory, with no warning, no response time, and no room for denial. And the message wasn't hidden in jargon or politics. The message was this: you make one wrong move, and we won't need to retaliate with words. We'll respond with certainty. Pakistan felt that pressure. You could see it in their diplomatic tone. You could feel it in their military recalibrations. The usual threats, they got quieter, the posturing less frequent. Because they knew what BRAHMOS meant. It meant that in a matter of minutes, key military installations, air bases, or command centers could be erased. Surgically, accurately, and at a speed that didn't allow for retaliation. That kind of capability doesn't just win wars. It prevents them. It wasn't about war, though. That's what makes BRAHMOS so devastating. It's not a tool of aggression. It's a weapon of control. It gives India the confidence to walk away from unnecessary conflict, because it holds the ultimate answer if ever provoked. And that control, that edge, is what has kept things from boiling over. Not just in South Asia, but globally, because the world now knows that India isn't just a regional force. It's a strategic heavyweight. That's the true power of BRAHMOS. It's not just about firepower. It's about perception, it's about presence, and it's about timing. Because when India demonstrated BRAHMOS, it wasn't just showing what it could do. It was showing when it could do it. And that when was anytime. The missile changed conversations in Pentagon war rooms, in Beijing command centers, and yes, in Rawalpindi bunkers. It shifted the psychological battlefield, because now any misstep, any threat, came with a very real, very fast consequence. And that's how you lead, not with noise, not with fear, but with certainty. There's a difference between buying power and building it. When you build it, when it comes from your soil, your minds, your people, that power becomes permanent. That's exactly what happened with BRAHMOS. This wasn't some off-the-shelf system imported with a user manual. This was years of relentless effort, of precision engineering, of Indo-Russian collaboration fused with Indian innovation. And what emerged wasn't just a missile, it was a declaration. A declaration that India had crossed a threshold, stepped into a league where only a handful of nations reside, where weapons don't just defend borders, they define stature. The BRAHMOS project began as a symbol of strategic cooperation. Yes, Russia brought its world-class propulsion technology, its experience in cruise missile systems, but India didn't come to the table empty-handed. Indian scientists brought vision, brought design, brought software, brought a fire to prove that this country was more than a consumer of defense tech. It was a creator. Over the years, that partnership evolved. What started as joint development turned into Indian dominance over the system's upgrades, production, and innovation. And now India is not just producing BRAHMOS for itself, it's preparing to export it. The student has become the master. That transformation is what shook the global community, because when you develop a weapon like BRAHMOS, capable of flying at Mach 2, 8 to 3, 0, skimming just meters above the surface, locking on with deadly precision, you're not just showcasing capability, you're proving independence. India didn't just add a missile to its arsenal, it added a deterrent that it built with its own hands. And in the realm of military strategy, indigenous capability is a game changer, because no one can sanction you out of it, no one can cut your supply, no one can shut it down. That is the ultimate form of sovereignty, and this weapon wasn't developed in isolation. It was designed to fit into India's modern doctrine. Land-based platforms, air-launched variants, sea-launched options. The BRAHMOS wasn't a one-trick system. It became a family, a versatile, modular system that can adapt to multiple combat scenarios. That kind of design thinking. That's strategic vision, and that vision didn't just shock the world. It terrified Pakistan, because the old comfort of thinking India's strength was mostly defensive disappeared. This was different. This was India announcing, we can strike, and we can strike first, fast, smart, clean. Think about what that means for an adversary, when you know that your airbase, your radar, your naval assets can be hit in under 5 minutes, before your chain of command can even pick up the phone. That changes how you talk, how you move, how you think. It forces restraint, and restraint in geopolitics is often the most valuable weapon of all. BRAHMOS didn't just change India's image globally, it changed how the world imagined India. Suddenly, Western allies began looking at New Delhi with new respect. Defense deals, strategic partnerships, joint exercises, they all took on a new tone, because BRAHMOS proved that India wasn't just a rising power. It was already there, and it proved it not by threatening peace, but by ensuring it. Because when a nation knows it can defend itself, truly, deeply, independently, it doesn't need to shout. It just needs to be heard once. And with BRAHMOS, India made sure that message was heard. When tensions flare between nations, especially two nuclear-armed neighbors like India and Pakistan, there's usually a narrow path to walk, one paved with diplomacy, deterrence, and, too often, dangerous brinkmanship. But every so often, a moment comes when the balance shifts, not because of words, but because of capability. And that moment came the day India embedded BRAHMOS into its frontline strategy. This missile didn't just sit in a silo waiting for a war. It stood as a signal, loud and clear. Any miscalculation from across the border would be met not with escalation, but with elimination. After the Balakot airstrikes in 2019, the region entered a new chapter. No more surgical posturing, no more warnings with no teeth. India had shown it was willing to strike first if provoked, and with BRAHMOS in its arsenal, the message was reinforced with steel and supersonic certainty. Pakistan suddenly found itself staring at a new kind of threat, not a missile that could maybe arrive in 10 minutes, but one that would be there before any radar operator could say a word. That is the difference between conventional deterrence and strategic dominance. And BRAHMOS closed that gap entirely. Pakistan had long operated under the assumption that its tactical nuclear weapons would keep India cautious, that the fear of escalation would keep New Delhi in check. But what happens when the response is so swift, so targeted, that it neutralizes the threat before it materializes? That's what BRAHMOS brought to the battlefield. Not just speed, but decisiveness. It gave India the power to surgically eliminate military infrastructure, forward operating bases, radar stations, or even mobile command units, all without crossing the nuclear red line. And suddenly, the old logic of mutually assured destruction was replaced with something far more terrifying, a one-sided endgame. Now, here's the part people often miss. BRAHMOS wasn't just built to destroy. It was built to control. Because when you have a weapon that removes your enemy's ability to react, you don't have to use it. You just have to let them know it's ready. That knowledge alone changes behavior. Pakistan, which once thrived on quick escalations and dramatic gestures, began operating with visible caution. Its airspace was no longer a safe zone. Its rapid mobilization drills lost meaning, because India could target, strike, and shut down critical infrastructure before those drills even got underway. That's not warfare, that's checkmate, and the message wasn't lost on the world either. Defense analysts from Europe to East Asia understood what BRAHMOS represented. It wasn't just another arrow in the quiver, it was the spearhead. India had, for the first time, positioned itself as a preemptive power, a nation capable not just of retaliation, but of neutralization. Pakistan was forced to evolve its strategy in response, not because of pressure from a peace accord, but because of fear, and fear is often the most honest motivator. This is how BRAHMOS changed the rules. It redefined the concept of balance, not through an arms race, but through technological supremacy. It gave India something no country in the region had, the ability to strike with impunity, and to do so with clarity of purpose. Not to provoke war, but to prevent one, and that's the mark of a mature power. Because when your enemy knows the next mistake might be their last, they don't gamble as much. Sometimes, the most powerful weapon isn't the one you launch, it's the one your enemy knows you can. BRAHMOS didn't just alter physical warfare, it transformed psychological warfare, and in the modern world, where perception drives policy and fear shapes diplomacy, that shift is everything. When BRAHMOS was inducted into India's arsenal, it didn't need to be fired in conflict to prove its worth. Its very existence created a new kind of silence, the silence of hesitation, of reconsideration, of fear. And in that silence, India gained control. Because make no mistake, when a missile flies at nearly 3 times the speed of sound, with the accuracy to strike within a few meters, you don't get time to react, you don't get to regroup, you don't even get to warn. And when your military planners, your generals, your strategic command knows that one such missile can take out their most valuable targets before they can even blink, they start second, guessing every move. That's not just military strategy, that's psychological warfare at its finest. You see, fear travels faster than sound. It spreads in war rooms, in radar stations, in cabinet meetings. Pakistan, after seeing BRAHMOS tested and deployed, began to adjust not just its tactics, but its tone. The usual firebrand rhetoric began to cool. Strategic ambiguity turned into visible caution. Because BRAHMOS is more than just a missile, it's a psychological presence. It doesn't need to scream to be heard. It whispers from silos and under wings, saying, "Try it and see." That's where the true brilliance of BRAHMOS lies. It makes war unthinkable for the enemy, not because of global pressure or diplomatic restraint, but because the cost of action is now too high. In the past, there may have been room for missteps, for testing limits, for small strikes that didn't demand a full-blown war in return. But with BRAHMOS in play, even a small provocation risks an instant and decisive response. And that risk, that uncertainty, it's a form of deterrence more powerful than any press conference or peace talk. And here's the part that cements its dominance. You don't even have to launch it for it to work. The deterrence is built in. Every time a BRAHMOS is paraded, tested, or quietly moved into position, it sends a message to those who are watching. And believe me, they are always watching. That message says, we are ready, we are fast, and we are precise. It tells your adversary that if things go sideways, their decision will end before they can even defend it. And that kind of message, it changes behavior, it forces restraint, it earns respect. That's how India flipped the psychological battlefield. It replaced old school say, rattling with silent assurance. It didn't threaten, it promised, and promise is more enduring than threat. Pakistan learned that post-Balakot, when India showed that strikes would no longer be theoretical. They would be swift, calibrated, and backed by weapons like BRAHMOS. And once a nation knows its opponent can hit first, hit fast, and hit hard, it becomes a lot less willing to roll the dice. In modern warfare, timing is everything, but psychology is what defines the winner before the war even begins. BRAHMOS gave India both. Every once in a while, a nation does something that forces the world to stop, pay attention, and rewrite its assumptions. That's exactly what happened when India went beyond just developing the BRAHMOS missile, turned it into an international symbol of strategic dominance and technological excellence. Because BRAHMOS wasn't designed to sit quietly in storage rooms. It was made to stand tall on the global stage. And now the world is lining up to buy it. The same countries that once viewed India as a secondary defense player are now negotiating to get their hands on this supersonic precision weapon. That's not just arms export, that's influence export. See, defense is about more than building things that go boom. It's about trust, reputation, credibility, and when India stepped into the role of a defense exporter, with BRAHMOS at the front, it sent a message to the world. We don't just defend ourselves. We help others defend their borders too. That is how superpowers are made, not just by protecting their people, but by equipping other nations to protect theirs, on their terms, with their values, and with the kind of tech that puts fear in the hearts of the reckless. And let's not forget what this means in the regional context. For decades, Pakistan saw itself as the gatekeeper of military strength in South Asia, often backed by allies who kept India in check, diplomatically or otherwise. But now, countries that once leaned toward Pakistan are eyeing BRAHMOS deals with India. Southeast Asia, Latin America, even parts of the Middle East, nations with real concerns about regional threats are looking to India not just as a marketplace, but as a partner in security. That flips the narrative completely. Suddenly, India's defense ecosystem isn't just inward looking, it's global, it's respected, and most importantly, it's feared. Exporting BRAHMOS doesn't just mean selling hardware. It means sharing strategy. It means allowing other nations to adopt India's model of deterrence, swift, silent, devastatingly effective. It gives these countries a seat at a new kind of table, one where power doesn't come from sheer volume of firepower, but from the ability to prevent war before it starts. That's the BRAHMOS legacy, not destruction, but domination through deterrence. And it doesn't stop at sales. With every deal, India builds new diplomatic bridges, creates new alliances, and strengthens its global influence, not just militarily, but politically and economically. BRAHMOS becomes more than a missile, it becomes a conversation starter, a partnership builder, a tool of international respect. The moment India starts shipping BRAHMOS beyond its borders, it's not just exporting a weapon. It's exporting trust, capability, and proof that it belongs in the upper tier of global powers. Let's be clear, this didn't happen by chance. It took vision, it took discipline, it took years of homegrown development, joint collaboration with Russia, and the kind of focus that turns ambition into legacy. And now that legacy is being packaged, signed, and delivered to the world. That's not just a win for Indian defense. It's a signal to every country that ever underestimated what India could build, what India could lead, and what India could control. BRAHMOS is now more than a national asset. It's an international force.